is everyone else. It's your call. There are no.
All right, this is hashtag Freethinkers. We are back with the second of these interviews. Like we told you, we took a break. For COVID, I didn't want to put the staff through a lot of things like that. So I decided to we were actually just gonna wait it out until everybody came back outside. But we have an election. We didn't know if they were going to keep the date the same. They ended up making the date June 9th, and so we have to activate community. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just got to roll. Sometimes you just got to roll. I mean, this is what we have to do. And so if we're rolling, the most important thing for us to make sure that we do in voting. Voting does not count. Voting is just participation if you're not voting for a person that you have vetted, that you have met, that you've had a chance to, hey, what are you asking to do for us, and what should we expect? If they haven't done that, it's kind of hard to really truthfully vote. So in our last interview, we had the challenger, I guess that we call it. The challenger would be candidate Nada Rutherford for coroner here in Richland County. And here we have the incumbent. Is that how that works? This is the incumbent.
I guess I would be the incumbent. Yes, sir.
The incumbent, Gary Watts, the current coroner of Richland County, I want to say, first of all, that I want to thank you for coming on, because many people ducked this. And I'll be honest, in 2018, a lot of people ducked it. In 2016, people ducked it. They didn't want to talk to the community. They just wanted to, hey, man, you know my name. And I'm glad that you're willing to be part of the change in the community, of the candidates to come out here and talk to us, right?
Absolutely.
Now tell us about yourself, Coroner Watts.
Well, I am a Columbia boy, born and raised in Columbia. I'm married. I have 2 children and 1 grandchild and another one on the way. As I said, I've been in Columbia my entire life. Seen a lot of changes take place. My professional career has been in Columbia also. I was a former law enforcement officer and then went on to become a death investigator assigned to the coroner's office. And then in 2000, ran for the office of coroner because I had some ideas that I thought would benefit Richland County as a whole. I was fortunate enough to receive the backing and the support from the community, and I was elected. And I've been in office since I actually took office in 2001. And so that's where I've been since then. I tell you that it's an honor to serve. And as you talked about, people have ducked you. I mean, I think that we took a totally different perspective here at the coroner's office when I came on board. We've always been available out there, going to community meetings, going to events, everything that we can possibly do to be a part of the community. And I think it's important that people understand why we've done that, because you have to build relationships in order to have trust. And I'm not naive enough to think that people want to deal with the coroner's office. We typically never have any good news to bring anybody. We may bring closure to something, but it's always as a result of some type of tragedy. And so in order to make that more possible and more, to a sense where we have some credibility, I felt like it was important that we have those relationships, that we could build the trust, so that if I come to you and talk to you about the death of a loved one, although you're not going to appreciate the fact that you've lost a loved one, you will appreciate the fact that you've seen me, you know me, you've built a relationship, and I have that trust so that you can believe what I'm telling you. And I think that's critical in any office. I don't consider myself a politician. I am not thick-skinned like politicians. When people say things about me, it bothers me because I don't look at myself that way. I'm a working guy that's out here just trying to do good, make a difference in the world, treat people the way they deserve to be treated, with compassion and dignity, respect. And that's where I am. I mean, I'm just your average guy. Please don't think of me as a politician, and don't think of me as somebody that's just around when it's time to vote. We're active all year long, every single year, and we'll get into some of the programs and things that we have certainly put forward. But again, I'm seeking the office for another term, and I hope that I can get some support.
Absolutely. Now, the programs that you're mentioning, are those part of the primary function of the coroner's office, or what is the primary function of the coroner's office?
So the statutory function of the coroner's office is to determine cause and manner of death. Okay, those are two very distinct and different things. The cause of death is the physiological reason that your heart stops. So you would agree that when somebody dies, their heart stops, correct?
Right.
Okay, so that happens to everybody that dies. When I came into office, I instituted the medical examiner system in Richland County. We now have 3 forensic pathologists that provide us with all of the medical details about someone that dies. They do the autopsies, they do the exams, they draw the fluids for toxicology. They report the cause of death to us. Our office is an investigative agency. And here's where the difference comes in, and this is where people get confused a lot of times. The pathologist will tell us that this individual died from, let's say, a sanguination or blood loss from a gunshot wound, okay? Our office investigates to determine whether that was a suicide, an accident, a homicide, or undetermined. Those are done from an investigative standpoint. We rely on the medical expertise for the cause of death. Our office is an investigative agency that determines the manner of death. There are thousands and thousands of causes of death. There are only 5 manners of death. And as I said, that's suicide, accident, homicide, natural, or undetermined. Our office is the one that investigates to make those determinations on the manner. The programs that we have put into place absolutely have nothing to do with the statutory aspect of what our office does. But I think it's just as important for us to be doing those things because, number one, it gives us a reason to be in the community. It gives us something to take out and share with the community, to be a part of the community. It's also something that, because of our investigation and the cases that we deal with, we're able to learn different things that we can provide helpful hints, different programs to prevent some of these accidental deaths. An example being with our Safe Sleep program. I noticed about 12, 14 years ago, we were having a large number of what at that time were called SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. And that was basically a diagnosis of nothing else. In other words, they do an autopsy, couldn't find anything wrong with the baby. They go back and say, okay, it was SIDS. Well, as we started investigating these cases, we realized that a large majority of those were due to unsafe sleep environments. And by unsafe sleep environments, I'm referring to when you put an infant down in a crib that's got a comforter or some pillows or other things in it, or if you have an infant in the bed with a caregiver and they roll over on top of them. If you think about it this way, your trachea is about the size of your little finger, and it's the same thing on a baby. You can imagine how small that is. Infants do not breathe from their mouth. They breathe through their nose, and that's so that they can suckle and breathe. So if you have something in the cartilage in their nose, it's not hardened either. So if that baby's on its face or pushes its face up into a pillow or a bumper pad in a crib or anything like that, and that little nostril or those nostrils are cut off, the baby can suffocate, asphyxiate. And so we realized by the investigations that when parents would say, well, everything was fine, I fed the baby, we were in bed together, I woke up this morning and the baby was unresponsive. And we realized that what was happening is that the parents were falling asleep, and because the baby is so small, could not get out from under them, somebody would roll over on top of them, and they would suffocate. Now, that's come about from investigations and talking with parents. We did the same thing with my baby. 25, 30 years ago, it was common practice to have a baby in bed with a mother, especially if she was nursing. They were tired and they'd go to sleep. But we've learned that that's not the proper thing or the best thing to do for a child. So we put together a program to educate caregivers about safe sleep. We teach those programs here at the office. We teach those programs here in the city parks in Columbia. We teach those programs here at any community meeting that wants us to be a part of it. We made a video that's been sent out to the hospitals around the county, around the state, just to educate parents and caregivers the proper way to place an infant to sleep, to try and cut down on some of these. We have seen a decrease in the number of deaths in Richland County due to unsafe sleep, and I believe part of it's because of that. the educational aspect of it. We started another program that deals with our troubled youth. You know, we see way too many of our kids ending up as homicide victims, gunshot violence, things like that. And so we partnered with the sheriff's office and created a program called Crossroads, which takes these children, and I say children because some of them are as young as 11 years old, and we bring them in and we talk to them. And depending upon the level of where they are and what decisions they're making is the level that we talk to them on. And what we try to do is get them to start looking at our alternatives and to make sure that they get back on the right path, because we don't want to see them here as one of our clients. You know, we want to help them make the right decisions to get them to lead a very productive, healthy, and safe life and be a productive, healthy citizen of Richland County. So those are just a couple of the things that we've done to be involved in the community. And I think that's, obviously, it's not part of what our statutory requirements are. But in the long run, I think that every single public office should be involved in the community and do everything they can to make the community better.
Absolutely. Now, so you said that those are two of the programs that the community should already know about, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when did those start? Just I'm not grilling, but I want to know when did those particular programs start?
We started the Safe Sleep. Yeah, we started the Safe Sleep program in 2006, I believe. Crossroads we've been doing since 2002.
Absolutely. Now, what because I'll be honest, this is the sleep program actually has affected. It's something that I have a family member that would have known about that. What does the coroner's office do to promote and let people know that information is available?
Well, it's on our website. It's something that we have promoted at the state house, the legislature, to try to make legislation to require parents to see that video, similar to what they do with car seats. You know, you have a new parent at the hospital, they make them sit down and watch a car seat video to make sure that they're placed in a car seat properly. So we're trying to do the same thing with the Safe Sleep to make sure that they all have the opportunity to see it.
Absolutely. So here's where I'm bringing. We have like I said, we have a resident from the community. You know, she actually has a working amount of experience with not working experience. She has experience. You know. What would you call that with the coroner's office? Interacting with the coroner's office, I guess as lightly as I can put it. And so we wanted to make sure that a person like that was able to ask questions and make sure that we know fully what the community would expect from the coroner, whether it be in your statutory duties or in the other things that your office wants to add to the community. We heard those things from candidate Rutherford, and let you to have a conversation. First of all, tell us who you are, and what is your experience with the coroner's office. Ms. Little.
Okay, my name is Tyra Little, and I met Gary in 2013 when my son was murdered by the police. He was shot in his back 11 times with a total of 12 bullet holes. So that was my first interaction with Mr. Watts. During the interaction, they did this thing that is called a coroner's inquest. And from my understanding of what a coroner's inquest is, and as Gary told me also himself, is that he speaks for the dead. So he's supposed to be the person that's representing, as what he earlier referred to when he was stating about the Crossroads program. He stated you don't want to see those kids as one of the clients. So I guess he would refer to the deceased people as a client. However, during the coroner's inquest, and so Gary, you can correct me if I am wrong, but we weren't even notified that there was going to be an inquest. How we found out about the inquest was the news media came running up in my mother's driveway. And so she immediately called me, and this is how we were informed. We didn't get any type of informal information from you stating that, there was going to be a coroner's inquest. And so, you know, I walked away from that. And let's back up to what a coroner's inquest is, because, you know, I never even knew what a coroner's inquest entailed or any of this until this actually happened. So if you could kind of elaborate so everyone would know exactly what you should expect when you have a coroner's inquest.
Right. Well, an inquest, and the reason we do inquests, especially in situations like yours, unfortunately, when law enforcement's involved, we want to be as transparent as possible. I don't want to be the only one making the decision. And so an inquest, what an inquest does is brings people out of the community to sit as jurors of the facts of the case. They hear the case. They make the decision as to whether or not to charge or not charge as far as the cause of, the manner of death. That is not something that I do. On most 99.9% of the cases that we handle, we get the investigative report from our deputy coroners in the scene. I'll look at that along with the medical records. I make a determination. When it's a case like this and some other ones that we've done inquest on, I'm not comfortable in making that decision. So I want other people to look at it. So that's why an inquest is brought forward, is so that those decisions are made by members of the community and not me.
Okay. So then I'm glad that you segued into about the jurors. So when I actually did have my attorneys and I requested that when the jurors would be selected, if we could be there, we were told that we would be able to be there. However, we were there. I was out there waiting. That never happened. I asked questions with the solicitor's office, which was Dan Johnson's office at this time. It was not Byron's. It was Dan Johnson. They told me that what they chose to do was they went through the voters registration and pull the jurors, the 6 jurors that they pull. And so with that, as we know, when you're looking at that report, you can see exactly how people normally how they vote. You're looking at their pattern. So we were not privy to that, as well as, and as you stated, you allow them, you all give them the facts and you let the jurors make the decisions. However, there were some things that we had discussed when I came into your office that you knew that were not true. Case in point, one of the main ones was that I did not call the police on my son. There were things that you allowed them with their opening statements to make statements of that, because you're the person that's sitting in the seat as if where we would expect when you're doing a trial that a judge would be. So, and let me also be clear, when there is a coroner's inquest, you have those 6 people that are given the information, but there's no one to object to any of the information that's given, not from the other side. We weren't able to object. And so being that you're the person that was the voice of, as you would refer to your client, my son, I really don't see where that was actually fairly done. Because, and I stated to you when you came to me during one of the breaks that I was not happy, I was not pleased because of how you even allowed them to open this thing up, knowing that they were giving false information to the jurors.
Well, let me say, first of all, that the juries are selected not by the voter file. They're selected from the same jury pool that anyone that serves in a court case, whether it's civil or criminal. It's the same situation. I have no idea how people vote when a jury is pulled. It's strictly from the jury pool that you get a notice in the mail, show up at the courthouse on Monday for jury duty. It's the same group of people, and that's where we get our jury from also. You should have been notified. A letter should have gone out. Who was your attorney at the time? And so I can check and see if
the attorney was Tony Desashore as well as Thad Myers. So Thad Myers actually was the lead counsel on that. And again, just like I said, we did not know that there was a coroner's inquest. No one from your office notified us. We found out through, if I'm not mistaken, it was WIS. Yeah, it was TV10. I cannot think of the young man who came out, but he came running up, and I'm looking like, what in the world is going on? You know, when my mom calls me to tell me that they're there. And so I ended up pulling up at the time while the young man was there, you know. And so this is where he found out. And then when we looked, and later on we saw where you had did you were on the news announcing, you know, saying as to why you were doing this coroner's inquest. However, you went on news and no one from your office, neither did you, notify us that there was going to be a coroner's inquest.
So wait a second. So let me remind everybody, this is for informational purposes. Y'all ain't watching a fist fight or a cat fight, okay?
Exactly.
We want to make sure that we know how the communication is supposed to happen.
Information wise, the procedure would have been, you would have received a letter saying that there was going to be an inquest held on such and such a date. If you didn't get that, you know, I don't understand why, but that would have been the procedure for you to have receive that information. It would have been done in writing.
Okay, well,
in those situations, is there another method that is used as a backup in any kind of situation, or is that just something they don't have in policy right now?
As far as what? Backup to what? To make sure?
Notification.
Notification. Any other forms of notification? Is there, is anything set up for for text or for phone or for, because I understand like our unemployment agency wasn't really ready for where technology needed to be communication wise when it was time for COVID-19. So are those things in place in the coroner's office or the coroner's office? Without
going to the office and going through the file and seeing everything that was done. I mean, we were having constant communication, I thought, with our attorney. And I know we had several conversations with Ms. Little. So if we failed to communicate properly to her the date and time of the inquest, I apologize for that. But that was certainly something that she should have been made aware of. And I will look to see if there's anything we can do differently to make sure that that never happens again, because it's very important for the family to be there for that process.
Yes, and to make sure that they're not notified by someone else, right off the street. It just, it did not give a good feel for the coroner's office. Now, there was something else that you stated, Gary, also when you were listing and talking about the programs that you guys have started. Is there another method? Because I know you were saying that I've never heard of any of those programs. And I'm just wondering what can be done better, because at this point, knowing that, okay, you have someone from the community, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that has never heard of these programs, what would you do going forth differently? One, to make sure that the voters, and you also said you're not a politician, but it is an elected office, so you would have to campaign in order to, to get your votes. What would you do differently to make sure that the community is armed with the information that these programs that you have? And also, what would you do differently to make sure that people understand everything that the coroner's office do? Especially explaining to them the process of a coroner's inquest.
Yeah, well, we are on every single possible social media outlet that we can be on, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of those. And we have a Facebook page. We have a website. We have publications that go out. There's a book that we have that we pass out in the community. I mean, we're passing the information out on every single avenue that I'm aware of. And it's also something that we do through the news media. Anytime we have one of these programs, we try to promote it as much as we can through the news media. Does everybody know about every program? I'm sure they don't. But, as far as promoting them, we do everything that I'm aware of that we can do to make sure that the information gets out. Mr. Curtis Wilson works with us in this office. He promotes a lot of the programs that we do. If there's something that we need to do different, I'll be more than happy to speak with him about that. But it's something that we have certainly tried to make available to everyone in the county, and always can do better. I mean, I realize that we can always do better, but it's something that, as far as I know, making sure that they're on the different media outlets that are out there now, along with, as I said, is posted on our website. So anyone can look and see, and hopefully they'll hear information from one of these other social media outlets.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to try to find a different way to notify the community and to educate them on the different things that the coroner's office actually do. Because right now, we can't put the onus on the community to go and to look on your webpage to find out. We have to have some type of more interaction so that when there comes that time to where someone has lost a loved one, that it's not that type of first time interaction. And regardless of whether it be in an office that, people may not want to hear from because of the death aspect, but how do we go about making a change to where we inform the community, and then that way maybe the interaction, because we all know that death is inevitable, it's going to happen to each and every one of us. But I think that if we, there's something that your office can do to make sure that they explain to the community everything that you all have to offer. And so some more community interaction is needed. I know you said that you go to community meetings as well.
Yes, and I don't know if you can see this or not. I'll hold this up real well. I don't guess you.
We can't. No, because you have your background.
Yeah,
you have
but anyway, we have a book that every deputy gives to next of kin. Okay, it goes through all of our different programs about grief counseling, all those other things. We have a letter that goes out on every single person that dies that we send to the next of kin that lists not only grief counseling groups but support groups for them. And also where they can find additional information. We have cards that we send out. So every aspect of that part of it is taking place. We do that on every single death. We send the information out. We hand the information out in person to make sure that people have this. And that's something, again, although it's on the websites, it's something that this book that we hand out, we follow up with a letter, because we know that most times that they receive this book, there's so much shock going on that they're not paying attention to a lot of things. So the book goes through a lot of the common asked questions and what can they do. And that's one reason we published that book, was to make sure that after the fact, people would have some kind of reference to go back to and see what was available for them.
Yes, and I hear you, and I think that's a really good thing that you've put together, a good tool, a reference tool that people can go back and use. But that's after the fact of them losing a loved one. So what I'm stating is, and what I was asking you is, what can you look at doing to having community action before a death, so that people can be informed? Because that's just as important. Because to me, I think that could change the way is what you described. It's how you feel people, view or deem the coroner's office. So, if you're looking at the coroner's office from what you were stating as, okay, no one wants to hear from it, that's not really necessarily true, because just like you say, you have programs that you all have put into place for the community. So I think we need to make sure that we get that information out to them, so that the interaction that we have with you won't always be one of death.
Right. And again, I say that, that we are promoting that through community meetings. We're promoting that through social networks. We're promoting that through our website. We're promoting that through our webpage, our Facebook page. All those things are there. And so, I attend probably on average 2 community meetings a week in different parts of the county. I attend different church groups. I attend different senior citizen groups. All that goes on. I mean, that's something that goes on every single week, every single year, not just election year. So trying to get the information out as much as possible.
Well, I'll have to make sure that you are invited to one of our community meetings, because I've never seen you there, but I would love to have you there so that you will be able to explain to the community, so it won't be a deaf interaction as to when the people of the community actually meet you. So I will definitely make sure that I get back to you with trying to set up a time that you can come to one of our community meetings.
And all you need to do is let me know, and we'll be there.
Will do.
All right. Another question. Okay. So of course, this is the question of the hour. I mean, this is what everyone's talking about. In the case, in the Minneapolis case, there are different levels of accountability. Right now, we're looking at things that the medical examiner would have said in this situation. And I know you said that you have 2 or 3 medical examiners. And what role does the coroner play in the case that has us all fired up, that doesn't seem to have been handled correctly, how would the coroner have been able to make sure that it wouldn't have taken 2 weeks to make that arrest?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. First of all, you've got to say that what happened in Minneapolis is inexcusable. There is no reason for anyone to be treated like that. There's no reason for someone that calls himself a police officer or a peace officer to ever treat anybody with that kind of disdain for their life. And so beyond the point of it being disgusting, reprehensible, the facts are that you need to know what the role of the coroner is in a case like that, or the role of the medical examiner. And as I said before, in the case, if that occurred in, let's just use if that occurred in Richland County, okay? The individual, Mr. Floyd, we would have autopsied him. We would have, the medical doctors would have determined the immediate cause of death, okay? Now, keep in mind that can sometimes take more than a day or two to get the actual cause of death because of some of the tests and things that they're running. But it was quite obvious from the video and everything else, what happened. He was asphyxiated. It's just like, when you're growing up, I mean, I did it. I don't know if you did or not. We played the pass out game, basically, where a friend would grab you around and just enough for you to pass out. It takes very little for somebody to pass out when you grab them around the neck. You got chokeholds that people use playing around. It's not safe, but people do it. So it takes very little time for somebody to pass out when you're starting to put pressure on their neck like that. That is not any kind of tactic that's trained in law enforcement circles. It shouldn't have been used. So you see that on TV, and so you've got a gut feeling is exactly what happened. He was asphyxiated. So what we would do is we would have the medical examiner would rule that, tell us what it was, tell us, probable cause of death is going to be asphyxiation due to an improper stance by the police where they put their knee on his throat. Okay, so we get that information, then I would rule that a homicide, okay? Because that's one of the 5 manners of death that I can rule is a homicide. Now, homicide is basically, and it's wide-reaching because it basically just means the taking of a life by another, okay? It doesn't always lead to criminal cases. And when I'm saying that, let's say you have a good example of that might be a car crash, okay? Somebody's in a bad car crash and they end up dying, and the other driver may be listed as a vehicular homicide, okay? That's not necessarily the same as murder, all right? So when we rule it homicide, we're basically saying that this person died at the hands of another. Then in Richland County, that information goes to the solicitor who ends up making the actual criminal charge against the individual. And in this case, it should have been murder, without question. I don't think anybody's in disagreement that this is certainly an overt act and he should have been charged with murder. And I don't know their timeline on what they do up there, why it took so long to do that. At the very least, they should have been terminated immediately when this thing happened. If they had to wait on some kind of test or something to find out to make sure that they had the exact cause of death, that might take a little bit of time, but there was no reason for those individuals not to have been terminated and basically been put on notice that you're going to be charged. Because I think it was obvious to anyone looking at that what they did was so far out of line. And as I said, it's just reprehensible. No one should be treated like that, and no one should ever have the ability to treat somebody like that.
Absolutely. Now, is there any, in the way things are structured, is there anyone that could give guidance to the coroner's office one way or the other? If there's a situation where maybe the community is clamoring that had to have been a homicide, but you put it in a different category. Is there any, is there anyone that gives guidance to that department if that's happening?
Well, no case is ever closed, okay? Mm-hmm. If there's ever any additional information that comes forward, case can always be reviewed, okay? We take our medical guidance from the medical doctors. That's what we rely on. I'm not a doctor. I'm an investigator. So my background is investigation. I leave the medical expertise to the physicians, to the doctors that are trained in forensic pathology. So they give me the medical aspect of it. We look at a case, in a case like that happened in Minneapolis, if something like that, God forbid, happened here, we'd be looking for independent witnesses. We'd be looking for independent camera footage that may be there from, some business cameras on the street. Any of those kind of things that we could pull to document the actions. And I don't know if that's been done up there or not, but it's certainly something that we'd want to look at here.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this then, in a case here, and when you listening to the audio of what the police are stating and you looking at their statements and they don't line up, and I'm actually speaking of the case, one of the cases that you were involved in, the case with my son, and looking at the facts of him being shot in his back, even the description of what the guy tried to say it gravity-wise, that he was climbing across the fence and turning back. If he pointed a gun, which we all know that the gun was in his pocket and it was not pointed at them, if he pointed a gun at someone, and also I will back up as well, I'm law enforcement too, I'm retired military police. There's no way, if a person pointed a gun at me, how do I end up shooting them in the back? So I mean, because I'm listening to what you're saying about the Minnesota case, but we're gonna bring it back home to Columbia, South Carolina. How is it that we could ever justify shooting someone in their back 11 times?
Right. Well, I don't know that you can justify shooting someone in their back. And without getting into all the specifics on your case, I mean, remembering exactly what was testified to, I don't remember that, obviously, and I'm not looking at that case in front of me right now. But I do know that when individuals are hit with a bullet or they are struck or whatever, their body turns in different ways, and those kind of things can certainly cause bullets to enter in different areas. This was a bad situation, that. I mean, it's a horrific situation for you to have lived through and to have to continue to deal with. And nothing is going to bring back your son. Again, I go back to, I wasn't comfortable in ruling on that case because of so many different aspects of it. And so we do take from the community and allow them to make the decision as to what should happen in a case like that. And I didn't make that decision. The jury made that decision. So that's, who you say, who would we take advice from? I don't know if you'd call that advice or if you would just call that listening to, what 6 independent people think about a particular case.
Yes, but we also have to look at the fact of how the information was presented to those 6 people. There was no one there that could object. There was no objections made. And people also have to understand that when you have those 6 individuals, they're only listening to what the solicitor is saying. And you're the person that's sitting in the judge seat. They have no one that is opposing, that's clearing up anything that they're saying. So I really don't see that as a fair assessment as well. And so my next question to you would be, Mr. Watts, after being a coroner for, we might as well say almost 20 years, you said you took office in 2001. Was that what you said?
Correct.
Okay. So 19 years, going on 20 years. At some point, do you think that you can become compromised?
Compromise? What are you referring to, compromise?
Well, after having relationships with different offices for so long, solicitor's office, different police offices, do you think that at some point that a person that has sat in the office for such a long time can be compromised? And if you don't, tell me the things that you would do to make sure that you reground yourself so that those relationships are not compromised.
Yeah, well, those relationships are relationships, but they have nothing to do with the performance of my job. I have integrity in myself. I have a self-worth. I am also a Christian, and I believe in doing the right thing. And so for someone to think that I'm going to make a decision based on the fact that I know somebody or knew somebody or know someone in the department is absolutely ridiculous. We don't.
Now, don't take offense because I'm not trying to blame you or anything.
No, let me answer.
But let me tell you this. This is the same question. This is the same question that I asked the candidate that's running against you. So I'm not asking you anything that I did not ask her as well.
No,
I just want to be clear.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that, that the decisions I make, I realize affect a whole lot of people. And there have been many a time that I have made decisions that have gone against the law enforcement agency or gone against the government agency. Certainly not something that would be beneficial to me. I'll give you a perfect example of that. We had a case years ago where the county jail had 3 inmates commit suicide within a period of about 60 days. Those inmates were on the mental health ward at the jail, and we did an inquest in that also. And what we determined through our investigation is that the medical personnel were falsifying information and not providing the medication to those patients that were on the mental health ward, and they ended up committing suicide. We lost 3 individuals because of that. Now, I ruled against the county in that, and the county ended up getting sued and paying millions of dollars in damages for that. That was certainly not in my best interest. I work for the county. Okay, that's who says my paycheck. But my true people that I serve are the citizens of the county. And I don't care whether it's a Richland County deputy or a county council member or a highway patrol or whatever. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to take care of what I'm supposed to be doing, which is taking care of the individual that has died. As you said, my client. Those are the people that I speak for. And
yeah, that's what you said. Yeah, your client.
Yeah, and I'm not concerned about what the ramifications are going to be against me from these different departments when I make my rulings. I'm going to rule based on the information that I have, the facts that I have, and if it turns out that it's against them, I'm sorry, but that's what it is. And so that's a self level of integrity that I have, and I'm not going to compromise that for any of those things.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And Mr. Watts, we thank you for joining us. I want you to know that this got a little more aggressive than I expected, but at the same time, it was all necessary because I feel like, because as we know, voting is hiring, and this community is getting to a place. If you haven't checked outside, where we hire different, and I appreciate you for coming to join us. Now what you just said, you just know that we are the community. And if you win this election, we're going to expect that from you.
You're accountable. That's right.
Yeah, and I would expect nothing less. And again, I've tried to be as transparent as possible in this office.
Yes, sir.
We put things out. We don't try to hold anything back. We try to make sure that everybody's aware of it. We try to treat everybody with dignity and respect. We try to take care of everybody that we can. And I would expect nothing less than being held accountable. I want you to hold me accountable. If you have an issue, I want to hear from you. I will assure you one thing: you will never not receive a return phone call from me. I might not like what you have to tell me, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell me what it is. And that's something I think is important. I'm in the office 6 days a week, every single week, and I will always return a phone call. You call me on a Saturday or Sunday, it goes to my office phone. From my office phone goes to my pager. From my pager, I call you back. It might take me, 30 or 45 minutes, but I always return my phone calls, and I'm always accountable to the public that I serve.
Absolutely. And I was about to get out of here, but did you say pager? Like, does it have numbers? Like, does it turn like this? Like it turns like this, and you can look at the pager like this one.
It's actually a phone, I guess. It has the page.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, man. We used to have the pages back in the day, man.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't think that they were still in making.
No, that's just old school pager. It's still on my phone and everything.
Absolutely. I will say that I will be looking to hear more in the future from whoever holds this office about the communication standards of the communication procedures as that pertains, because it sounds like that's something that could use some work. Not negatively, but just we're all evolving, right?
That's right.
And but other than that, I thank you once again. This was a great interview, very informative. You stood and delivered, and so now let's all let's all get ready. We have both. We've heard from both candidates. We're getting ready to make our decisions. Where can they learn more about your campaign, things that maybe weren't covered in this interview?
Well, I mean, they can obviously my campaign is everything that I do here. So the website through the coroner's office. Also, we have a campaign website, Watts for Coroner. And I want to thank you for doing this, number one. And number two, I'd just like to say that I'm not naive to think that we don't make mistakes. You know, and if I make a mistake, I'm going to acknowledge that, because I believe that the only way you don't make mistakes is if you don't do anything. And so I would much rather do something, make a mistake, and learn from it and move on and do better in the future. So, you know, I'm not naive to think that we haven't made mistakes, that there aren't things that we could do better here. And, you know, I relish knowing about those things so we can make those improvements. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we do everything perfect. But I am going to sit here and tell you that if I'm aware of a problem, I'm going to do everything I could possibly do to correct that problem and make sure it doesn't happen to the next family. You know, things as little as a miscommunication to a family. You know, they didn't get a phone call, or somebody didn't call them back when they were supposed to. You know, people look at that when they're going through the process of grief. It's a whole lot different for them than it is for us on the other side making those calls. And we try to do everything we can to make sure that we stay in contact with the families, provide them with everything we can provide them with. And I know stuff falls through the cracks. It happens everywhere. And in our case, it can be sometimes more devastating than others. But as I said, I realize the only way you don't make mistakes is if you just sit on your hiney and don't do anything. And so we do a lot, so we're going to make mistakes. Hopefully we learn from every single one of those and don't repeat it. And again, thank you so much for having me on and giving me the opportunity. I appreciate that. I appreciate the support I've received in the last 20 years. I hope I still have that support in the community, because there's a lot more we'd like to do.
Absolutely. And we want to thank you also, Ms. Little, because this had to have been a little bit hard, but you handled it professionally, and you kept control, and we thank you for that, because we know how hard that is. You know,
I don't think we can even possibly imagine what she's had to deal with.
Exactly. So we thank you for being a part of making this community a better place by helping us understand the office of the coroner in a way that I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't understand last week. Okay. So we thank you all for joining us. This is hashtag Freethinkers. We'll see everybody at the polls June 9th. We hire folks.
June 9th.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Watts. Did you give us our website, by the way? I just thought about that. Did you give us the website?
It's Watts for Coroner.
Watts for Coroner. WattsForCoroner.com. All right. Yes. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Little.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.